Welcome to another episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. I am your host, Kelly Melissa Reinhart. And as with every other show, I am excited for you to be, whether you're watching or listening, because we talk, myself and my guests. Yes, I have a guest this week. We talk about some hard conversations. We also talk about things that can potentially help you if you are going through an experience, whether it be mental health or substance abuse, or maybe you have had thoughts or suicidal thoughts in the past. But whatever you might be experiencing, I want you to know that you're not alone. And that is the best part about the show is I bring guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates, or those with lived experience. And if you've been watching or listening for quite some time, you probably know that most of my guests have a story behind why they do what they do now and led them into this place of whatever it is that they happen to do. But they're also going to give you some really valuable tools that you can go and utilize if you choose. So without going on a huge rant like I always do, I'm going to introduce my guest for today, Michelle Sherman. She is PhD LPAPB. She's a licensed clinical psychologist who has dedicated her career to supporting families dealing with a mental illness or trauma, PTSD. She has worked in diverse settings, including the Veterans Affairs, healthcare system, private practice, and academia as a professor at the University of Oklahoma and University of Minnesota medical schools. Dr. Sherman is a fellow of the American Psychologists Association, which is the APA, and is board certified in couple and family psychology. She is the editor-in-chief of Couple and Family Psychology Research and Practice, the Journal of APA's Society of Couple and Family Psychology, and was named their Family Psychologist of the Year in 2022. She has published over 75 articles in peer-reviewed journals and has given several hundred workshops nationally and internationally. She also serves on the board of the Oklahoma National Alliance of Mental Illness, which is NAMI, for 14 years, and also enjoys volunteering with the Minnesota NAMI affiliate. So without further ado, thank you, Michelle, so much for joining me.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Kelly, so much. I'm really happy to be here and I appreciate the lovely introduction.
Of course, my mouth and my brain weren't connecting fully there, but they'll get there. Don't worry. So can you tell, I know I gave the bio, but can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and why you do what you do?
Yeah. So I live up here in Minneapolis, and so I'm looking outside in a cold, snowy day today, and happy to have the chance to be with you. I really liked your intro, by the way. I would say it was really a great thing, all the roles that you do and your real focus on helping people feel not alone. So why I do what I do, let's see. I started off as a math major in college. I got to the point that's like, okay, this ain't cutting it. First of all, I could not understand linear algebra. It was way over my head. And I didn't feel like I was really using my gifts and having quality meaning in life. And so I switched to psychology, drawing upon a variety of volunteer experiences I had in my life, be it in college, going and being at the hospital when people had a sexual assault, to tutoring, to lots of different kind of volunteer work I've done, and haven't kind of looked back since. And so I really dedicated my career to psychology, and more specifically supporting families in which loved ones with a mental illness or history of trauma. And as you said at the beginning, most of us have a personal connection, and certainly I do as well. The professional story is back in the early 90s. I was working in a VA hospital at the time and was just struck by all the family members in waiting rooms and the commonality of their needs and experience, and them often feeling so alone. Their loved one goes in for their brief, 10-minute psychiatry appointment, and maybe they go in, maybe not. But that's actually when I wrote my first very small, like $3,000 grant to develop family education programs. And I've continued since then in different formats. And so the professional track of this focus began there. The personal one is really a lifelong one of loving people who in my family and friends who experience mental illness, and really wanting to develop resources that could help them, that help family members, help them be seen, give them tools and skills. Because let's face it, there are amazing, wonderful organizations such as NAMI, as you mentioned, and others, but not everyone's going to go to the support group for lots of different reasons. And so I've really spent the last couple of decades developing resources to support these families, and especially including teenagers, which I hope we get to talk about, the teens whose parent has mental illness or trauma as well. So both professional and personal is the short answer. And those are a couple stories of how I got here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we'll definitely talk about teens. And I know that's a huge topic, especially so I'm in Colorado, so I totally get the snowy.
Yeah,
it's very snowy here also. You're probably more snow than we have right now, but yeah, I just love the fact that I have a communication major, a minor in psychology, but also the math thing was like not my thing either. So I totally get that. And I thought that for a long time, my degree was a great paperweight up until I really jumped into my nonprofit and started focusing more on the mental health aspect. And I love the fact that you help families, and because the family, especially parents and the children, like everybody involved is really important when we're talking about somebody who has a mental health challenge or experiences one. So I love the aspect that you bring everybody together to really support whomever might be having that challenge.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's really kind of my mission, is that I think that they have their experience, their needs, the insights and awareness they have been kind of neglected, frankly, for too long. And it's important that we see, include, engage them. And empower and support them in ways with research-based tools that could be helpful. So I'm glad that my thesis, my kind of mission really resonates with you.
Yeah. And so the other part of that I really heard is oftentimes I have had several guests of kind of the opposite of how do parents help their youth when they're experiencing mental health challenge. But I like what you said is we're kind of flipping it, how like the child, when they have a parent who has a mental illness challenge, I like to use challenge instead of disorder or illness, but that aspect we don't talk about as much. So I would love if you want to dive in there. That would be wonderful.
Don't let me stop. Don't stop me. Yeah. So basically, we know from decades of research that these young people are at higher risk of developing emotional health, behavioral health, academic, social, peer, etc. problems. And it's due to both nature and nurture, right? We know that many mental illnesses have a considerable biological genetic component. So we've got the DNA, how you're born, and then we've got some of those life experiences. And let's face it, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, if the whole family unit is focused around, we'll just make up a hypothetical situation in which the dad is having recurring, let's just say perhaps manic episodes, and is repeated hospitalized or is struggling in that way. The co-parent, we'll just say heterosexual, we'll say the co-parent mother, and the children, a lot of their emphasis and attention may be focused on helping dad, being in the hospital, what are we going to do, managing his job, et cetera, et cetera. And so it kind of makes sense. But then sadly, these children are going, hold on, depending, of course, on their age and their understanding. What about me? Who's going to take me to my soccer game, or who's going to help me with my homework, or who's going to ask me, hey, how are you doing? I mean, I have a real concern actually broadly in our country and mental health care system, how siloed adult mental health care and child mental health care is. I mean, I think the kid people do better because they ask about parents, but the parent people, the adult people, wow, I think we got a long ways to go, Kelly, and encourage them to ask even, do you have children other than the standard intake? And then how are they doing? Who is supporting them? Who's helping them? You know, London, UK, Canada, Australia, they have many, many, many programs and funding and resources to support and see these children. But in our country, we really don't have many resources. There's certainly no consistent programming or things nationally. So I'm really passionate about helping our system move in a direction of being able to identify, support, and provide resources for these young people who oftentimes feel really alone and really confused. And we know, right, that when children don't understand something, be it parental divorce, mental illness, substance use, they blame themselves. And so the kids think, what did I do wrong? What's going on? And oftentimes that can lead them to their own spiral of mental health problems. And so I'm a really firm believer of trying to get in kind of early education and prevention and things, because there is some growing nice data that if we can get in and intervene or prevent early, we may help prevent the development of the really long-term and severe things. You know, you look at even the first episode psychosis programs that are certainly growing, and some of the really nice data showing if we can do with people who may be just starting to experience or first episode of some sort of schizophrenia or psychosis, if we can get in and provide that wraparound care early, that perhaps prevent the development of long-term illness or help them do well, it has a lot of potential. So we need to continue to fund that. But I think that's even too far downstream. I want to go even more upstream and look at just, you know, what, for example, folks in the UK do. There's a program called Our Time. And actually, I'm so excited. In 2 months, I'm going to go to UK and meet the founder, the head of it. But they do such cool things in school prevention. They have kids' time workshop sorts of stuff. They have family things. They have a whole host of programs for people. So I'm going to go and learn about it and see if there are tips or ideas that we can bring back to doing more in our country. So yeah, I'm very passionate about it. I've just released the second edition of our book for teenagers, which is called I'm Not Alone: A Teen's Guide to Living with a Parent Who Has Mental Illness or a History of Trauma. And so I really am intentional in trying to create resources to help these kids have words to understand, helpful and evidence-based ways of coping and ways of building their own resilience, given their clear increased risk. What can they do both to perhaps prevent the development of the illness and then to cope with it if some of the symptoms and things start to crop up?
Wow. Yeah, so just recently I learned about the early detection system. We do a film festival with my nonprofit, and we had a film that was submitted this last year all about that, which was really, really cool. And I didn't know anything about it. And so I think it's very interesting. UK is so much more advanced, and they're actually implementing. I know that talking to some counterparts internationally, they embody mental health, and they want to have everybody. I mean, like, mental health first aid is required for everybody, and it's just really, really cool what they're doing out there. So yeah, I wasn't even familiar with that up until this 2024 summer.
A lot of people aren't, Kelly. You know, and I definitely do want to note my admiration and respect and appreciation for NAMI and DBSA and Mental Health America. I mean, we have wonderful organizations here, so this is not intended as criticism. And of course, they can't do everything. And I would continue to hope that we can empower such organizations to fund, to invest in prevention, in early intervention, and looking at these young people. I just think that that's our future, right? And if there are ways that we could try to help decrease the severity or intensity or minimize the burden of mental illness a decade or two from now, why aren't we doing it?
Yeah. I remember, actually, so as you were talking to, I remember being in health class in high school, and my teacher, his father lived with schizophrenia, and he actually had Tourette's, but he talked a lot about the experiences that he went through with his father and when he went into psychosis, and how, I mean, it's so vivid in my memory of him telling us the stories of when his dad went into psychosis and how it was for him as a child and for his brother. And I mean, that was a really long time ago in high school, but I remember that. I remember him telling us as a child how that made him feel when his dad went into these episodes. So that's why I think what you do is so important.
And you know what? I love that your health teacher shared that with all of you. And I know you may not remember the specific thing they taught about the healthy plate method or whatever, in part of health class, but you remember the story. And that's what decreases stigma. That's what helps touch people's hearts. It's like that is what it takes. And so I love that he shared that with you and it made such an impact. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I love doing the show, just because we can have these open conversations and there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong, right? It's just all about how can we help as a society? How can we potentially, especially with youth? And I know the focus, kind of like you were saying, is that how do we help our youth, but how do we look at the family as a whole and understand that even negative behaviors or maybe school challenges, right? It could be stemming from something that's actually happening at the house. And I think that's part of the conversation that we might be missing altogether.
Absolutely. I think the ACEs research, the adverse childhood events research that's been looking at, has increased some awareness of, because parental mental illness and substance use is one of the categories on that assessment of that screener. And so we're increasing awareness that it's happening a lot more than, we know. And so when you think about, again, a classroom a child is in, it's like probably several children in every classroom are having this experience. And we put money into talking about, okay, let's talk about important things like trying to prevent smoking. Let's talk about trying to increase physical activity. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I think all these things are actually incredibly important and good things for mental health. But if you even look at some of the indicators in terms of what affects morbidity or mortality, quality of life and length of life, some of the issues of belonging, connection, social isolation, that's actually more impactful on morbidity and mortality than even things like smoking. Being lonely is just as bad for your physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Isn't that fascinating? And so the more that we can help early with some of these children who maybe are feeling very alone, or the family members, that's my other area of real passion, of course, is not just the child, but the parent, the partner, the sibling who's like, whoa, this is not either the person that went off to war and came back with severe PTSD, or this is not the person who I married or I fell in love with, that journey can be really lonely too. And so how can we continue to help them feel seen, belong, and listened to within the confines of the challenges of very understandable and necessary laws, privacy laws, HIPAA and things like that, but that can be incredibly frustrating for family members. So it's complicated. But I think continue to advocate for families being seen, heard, and included and listened to.
Yeah. And that's, such a great way. We're going to go to our first quick sponsored break, but once we get back, we can dive a little bit more into, the collective of how this looks when somebody might be in a family of this type. So we'll be right back after this quick sponsored break.
8 million people die by suicide in the world each year.
One person dies due to suicide every 40 seconds. Have you ever felt completely alone?
Like your life doesn't matter.
You are not alone. Call the National Suicide Lifeline at 988.
Hope and recovery is possible.
You can help too.
With only $19 a month, you help us save lives through mental health and suicide prevention education.
Scan the QR code or go to makementalhealthmatter.org to sign up as a warrior for mental health today.
Laura Cross, your host for Mindful Mondays, every Monday at 1 p.m. Central Time, where you can embark on a transformative journey of self-care and ultimate happiness. Tune in to the Voyage to Vitality channel on the Achieve TV network. Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. Be there, be mindful, and join us on E360 TV.
Hi everyone, I am Sinead from Brador. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. Please join me in my Power Hour every Sunday, 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on E360 TV. Mwah!
And like that, we're back. If you happen to be just joining the Make Mental Health Matter show, thank you so much for listening or watching. My guest for today, Michelle, we are chatting about really the idea of the whole family involved as we talk about a mental health challenge, not only just when your child is struggling, but also when maybe the parents live with or experience a mental health challenge, and how that really plays a role in the dynamics of the family. Also understanding that there are certain things that we can do across the world, things that are being done, and really great organizations that are helping in this space. So I know that was like super short synopsis of what we already talked about, but I'm curious. So I know, and with my own family and our history, and just watching other families go through experiences, especially kids that maybe sometimes are having those behavioral challenges, and then we're not really looking at the family together in whatever's happening. I don't know what the question is here, but I'm just thinking, I know you have the new book coming out, which really talks more specifically about that. So I'll just let you take it from there.
Yeah, so my mom, who is a teacher, a retired teacher and mental health advocate, and I have, for 20 years, Kelly, been joining forces in really trying to think about how to support the entire family. In my work day at the VA hospital, I developed kind of interventions for the veterans, and sometimes did couples therapy a lot. I still do that. And we kind of looked at, all right, in the mid 2000s, actually, we said, all right, we need to create some resources for the teenagers. So we created 3 of them, actually. One for a parent who was deployed in military, one whose parent has experienced trauma, and one for a parent who has a mental illness. We were actually, Kelly, really honored, and I share this story not in a bragging way, but a recognition of the void of resources, because our book for parental trauma, called Finding My Way, A Teen's Guide to Living with a Parent's Experienced Trauma, was picked up by the National Guard, and boxes were sent to all Guard units across the country. So we were really humbled, and it just, I think, speaks to us about the lack of resources to have ways of talking to teenagers and helping them understand their parents' trauma. So we did that kind of in the mid 2000s, and then right at the beginning of COVID, about 5 years ago, I said to my mom, hey, do you want to write another book? And her honest truth was, she said, honey, I would do anything with you. That's such a mother, but little did we know the journey that we would be on. But yeah, last month we released one, and then actually in 2 weeks, we release our next one. We're super excited about them. And so the way in which our books are different, and why I intentionally want to describe them, is that, let's face it, there are a lot of books out there. You can Google, what is depression? What are medications for schizophrenia? You can Google all that. We don't need another book describing all the facts. So what we did instead was we took kind of my 30 years of clinical experience doing this, and all the stories and experiences and things. Of course, no identifying information and no one's specific story themselves, but kind of try to put a lot of that together in a way of portraying it in an interactive fashion. So it is really all activities, exercises, some facts, some stories from people with lived experience who gave us permission, not my clients, people who gave us experience, authorization to share their stories. But it really is intended to be kind of a support group in a book. Again, like I said earlier, for reasons of stigma, money, access, transportation, scheduling, childcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many people will never reach out and attend a support group or therapy or things. So how can we kind of bring that to people that they can just hit boom and have it immediately on their phone or their iPad or whatever? How can we help people realize that their experience is honored, is seen, is valued? And then not only the affirmation and validation, but teaching them research-based skills, such as how are tips for communicating with your loved one? What are limit setting and boundary skills? So important, so difficult sometimes. What are ways of tips for navigating the healthcare system, which can be really, really challenging? What do I do when we're in a crisis? Maybe they're acutely psychotic or need to be hospitalized or things. A huge issue is stigma. And how do I talk to my employer, my friends, my family? How do we balance all that? How do we deal with specifics of trauma and substance use, parenting and co-parenting, and dealing with all these sorts of things? Advocacy. What are ways in which advocacy may be a way some people find helpful in their healing? So every chapter is very interactive. It has some information, some skills, some resources, but then very interactive. The one for teens, and that was called Loving Someone with Mental Illness, Skills, Hope, and Strength for Your Journey. The one for teenagers is similar, but it is a little less focused on some of the more adult sorts of things, but again, more focused on exploring their experience, their emotions, similar things of talking to friends. We don't get into caretaking because we don't want these teenagers to feel like it's their responsibility. Not that they may not, and probably are, maybe doing some things like helping with appointments or maybe medications and things like that with more serious mental illness, but helping them to still be kids, to know how to talk with their parents, to deal with stigma, and then really what are the research-based ways to help them manage their vulnerability, their risk, and ways of trying to decrease that and cope with it. So the teenage one, of course, is more visually attractive in terms of colors and things like that. It's written for a teenager, rather than for adults. So that's really what we've done, and really are very hopeful that they can be accessible resources for people, that a person can have not only their head, but their heart touched.
That's amazing. And I know, just resources in general. So with my nonprofit, we kind of help navigate some of the resources, but also making sure that we have the trusted resources, because you don't want to just, as you know, just hand people a list and be like, okay, bye, good luck,
Right.
see you later. And that can be, it's so, not always, but it can be very challenging, especially for somebody who is struggling themselves to try to navigate the system.
Yes.
So having that book in their hand to be able to, go through different parts at different times, depending on what's coming up or what's going on, it just sounds like it would be really, really helpful. And yeah, resources generally are the biggest thing that people need, and something that they can even access privately instead of going to those groups like you were saying. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we have kind of a guide at the very beginning of the book. If you are this, go to these chapters. If you are this, da da da. So you don't read from the first page to the last page. You can, but it's like, what do I need today? I am feeling so frustrated because my husband, he's there, but he's not there. Okay, maybe I want to read about ambiguous loss and the idea of the loss of certain mental illness and moving toward acceptance. What do I do if my wife is really being kind of verbally out of control to me? Okay, maybe I want to read the chapter on timeouts and managing limits and things like that. So it's very much digestible in that way.
Yeah, I love the aspect too that you said, is that helping teens know that they don't have to be the caregiver. And I think that goes along with the whole entire family, right? You don't always have to be or play that caregiver role. There are boundaries that you can create, and I never understood those for a very long time. And then as I started to put in those boundaries, it helps so much with your own mental health too. And I think that's important.
Oh, it's huge. It's I couldn't agree with you more. It's huge. And always encouraging empathy and sensitivity and understanding. And so I'm not at all saying to harden your heart or things of that nature. And at the same time, if you don't set limits, and whatever they may be, from it's not okay for you to use profanity or to have drugs in the house or whatever it may be, any sort of violence of these sorts of things, then it's not good for them and it's not good for you. So we actually talk about a lot of people who don't set limits and boundaries and what's the consequence for them and for their relationship. A lot of people do that for decades, right? It's like so much resentment, physical health problems, emotional health problems. But it's hard, right? It's scary. It's setting boundaries is difficult. And so we offer specific skills and tools for how to do so because it's hard.
Yeah, it's definitely, I know for me, like being in the mental health space on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I have to put those boundaries in place for myself around my business too, because and that's what I always tell people. I'm like, I would love to spend time with people all the time or like offer to be, available 24/7, but I can't be your 2 a.m. person. Like I can't do that because I have to be in this world 24/7.
Exactly. It's not good for anyone. That's why we have crisis lines and things like that, and mental health professionals and clergy. And I mean, it really drawing upon that village. But, many family members, I think about several of the moms that I know, not clinically, personally, who say, it's hard because where's my loved one going to go? Maybe there aren't any beds in town, or maybe they are in trouble with the law or things like that. And so maybe some of the psychiatric units, won't take them or things like that. It's really hard. And so what do I do? And often not having training, not having resources, not knowing what to do. Like, what is this? Is this a midlife crisis? Is this drugs? Is this, what the heck is going on? So it can be very lonely and isolating and confusing, and a huge burden. And so I absolutely agree the importance of getting support for yourself while caring for a loved one. It's essential. It's one of our main premises, actually, is the necessity of taking good care of yourself.
Yeah. So we're going to go to our last quick sponsor break. And then once we get back, maybe we can give a couple ideas around even that self-care aspect or whatever that looks like. We'll figure that out. We'll be right back.
1,917 people die daily from suicide globally.
I lost my middle sister, Carrie, to a completed suicide on February 20th, 2017.
How does Make Mental Health Matter save lives?
Number 1. Awareness.
My story, however, it isn't unique. I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering addict. For 14 years, I was in active addiction. And because of Kelly and the work that she does and the opportunity to have my voice heard, I was able to stay clean and sober and have hit a year. I'm still here. And if it wasn't for Kelly answering my call the day that I thought I was going to take my life.
Number 2. Conversation.
I'm curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community, it is very hush-hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelly, because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show, and I saw how real and authentic you were. And I just appreciate the question because it is different, and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be, because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with.
Number 3. Education.
Kelly's passionate commitment to mental health awareness is a beautiful thing. It's clear in her social media posts, it's clear in the resources that she puts together, and the activities that she provides, her collaboration with organizations, and the consistent way that she continues to deliver a message, encouraging people to understand that they can share openly and to break the stigma around mental health. Kelly's topics cover children and adults, talk about things that we can do as a community, things that we can do individually, and her website is packed with information and resources and all kinds of contacts that you can use to reach out, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you're looking to help somebody else who is struggling. I encourage you to check it out.
Like that. We're back again. If you happen to be joining now, thank you so much. Make sure you go back and watch the first half of this because we've had a really great conversation so far. Michelle, I wanted to just see if you might have some tools that you'd like to offer to the audience as this whole conversation that we've been talking about.
Yeah, you bet. You know, one of the things that, as my mom and I were writing this book, I'm like, okay, Mom, this is what the research says. And she's like, Michelle, you can't say that. Everyone knows it. They're going to like roll their eyes. So, Mom, I can't really debate what the research says. And so we also know, and myself included, sometimes common sense isn't always common practice. You know, how many of us always drive under 50 miles an hour or eat 5 fruits and veggies a day and blah, 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 blah. So some of these things may be reminders, but perhaps they're helpful reminders anyway. And these are the things that actually research shows, not just like my opinion, but things that research shows can help prevent the development perhaps of some mental illnesses like depression and anxiety. And then if one is dealing with them, these are things that can be helpful. So one of them is regular sleep. It is so clear that getting regular sleep is important. There's actually a really nice psychotherapy that I'm always trying to educate people about called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. And if you could ask your physician, therapist, whatever else about this, but it is a structured treatment that is super effective to help people with sleep problems. And I mean, we know the prevalence of sleep problems is so great in general, much less for people dealing with emotional challenges. So finding ways to get regular sleep is huge. Relatedly, taking good care of our bodies in terms of moving our bodies. You know, it continues to be study after study showing about the benefits of moving our body. Now, this doesn't mean a marathon. It doesn't necessarily mean that 10,000 steps that people have kind of debated about, but regularly moving our bodies is the endorphins is like something you can't debate. I'll say for my own self and my own taking care of my own mental health. It's a super important in my everyday ritual of moving my body. Really important physical exercise. Being cautious about our eating, you know, food is health, food is mental health. And so being thoughtful about our choices, certainly that doesn't mean you can't have an ice cream or whatever else, but it's everything in moderation. So being careful about that. But the one I'd actually like to perhaps even most strongly recommend, in addition to education, of course, learning about mental illness. And as you alluded earlier, Kelly, being careful about the misinformation that's out there. There are a lot of groups or websites or Facebook groups that I think at times provide not only misinformation, but kind of scary things. You know, this is how you learn to have an eating disorder or this sorts of things. So I think just being cautious about the media that you do consume, as well as the quantity of media consumption, being careful about that. But the thing I'd like to actually emphasize is this idea of simple word, but important and powerful concept, and that is connect. The more we human beings isolate behind our darn phones and scrolling in our bedrooms, you know, one of my friends always would say, a psychologist in Oklahoma where I used to work, when you're depressed, and even in general, your bed is not your friend. So staying in bed, I just get out of your bedroom, just go to the couch or do something if that's all that you're up for that day. Removing yourself from your bed and connect. I personally am a big believer and proponent of volunteer work. And this doesn't mean you have to go and save the world, but doing something with maybe the pet shelter or children or elderly or hospital. I mean, being ways of giving back, finding ways of connecting with others, because so often that helps you put your own struggles in perspective. It can be a way of feeling like you've made a difference that day. You know, when we think about, we put our head in the pillow at the end of every day, what did I do today that mattered? And it may be as simple as when I was walking out of the grocery store, I saw someone was really struggling and I held the door for them and we had a really nice smile. I was actually at the grocery store with my mom the other day. And again, in Minnesota, it's cold. I was right before the holidays and there was a bell ringer, you know, they often have for the holidays. And my mom noticed that this bell ringer looked really sad and was struggling. So mom went inside and I think there was a Starbucks and asked if they would donate a hot chocolate for this person, which they did and went out and gave it to the person. And it was a really lovely connection encounter. It's little stuff like that. We're not talking about changing the world, although go and do that too if you want to. But it's the little ways in which, when I put my head in the pillow that night, I can go to sleep feeling that was a really cool moment, a connection in which a person felt, saw, and seen. To me, that is, what does the Surgeon General say, right? We have an epidemic of loneliness. And I think loneliness is a huge part of mental illness and a huge part of families struggling with mental illness. And so let us be on the lookout for others, for our community, not just those that we think, okay, this person broke their leg or had a round of breast cancer. And of course, they're very, very good to support. I'm not minimizing that. But what if my neighbor had their child go to the hospital because they had a suicide attempt, or because someone had a manic episode or things? What does their community do? Sometimes nothing. Sometimes say things that are not helpful or not kind or things like that. And so how can we change the narrative? How can we be looking for and finding ways of reaching out, connecting, helping people feel not alone? That is a huge thing that I think we can do every day. You don't have to go be the president of NAMI. What can you look for? Because let's face it, with the prevalence of mental illness being, 1 in 4 or so, everybody knows at least somebody, right? And so what are we doing to reach out to support them? Again, through maybe cold, dark months of winter, through times of political unrest, changes, certainly in the people that I'm serving, there's a lot of distress surrounding perhaps what may be changing in our country with the upcoming inauguration. Social, racial unrest. Their weather, obviously look in Los Angeles right now, with the fires. People are hurting all around us. Are we noticing? Are we seeing? Are we reaching out? Connect. That was, I guess, the other tool I would say. Eating, sleeping, of course, smoking, alcohol, nutrition, and connect. Those are some of the things that I would offer as helpful reminders.
Yeah, I took the Safer Suicide workshop that NAMI put on.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the biggest thing that I heard from all the speakers was connection and community. Like those are the two things that they're finding that is actually helping save lives more than anything else. So yeah, that's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And 988 and things like that are great. We need those. Absolutely. That's imperative. And it may be your neighbor. It may be a coworker that you walk by every day and don't even ever say hi to them. How are we building community? That's huge. I think that's where it's at. Mental illness or not, and remembering mental illness, mental health problems is on a continuum. And so, yeah, certainly there are some, we could say the more severe mental illness or things like that. But let's face it, we all have times that we go through times of depression and sadness and anxiety. And so this life can be tough. How can we take care of ourselves and take care of those around us that are struggling without losing ourselves in the meanwhile?
Yeah, that's just, I'm like, mic drop. I love that you brought up the aspect of the connection and making, overall, right? The overarching, and like you said, is some of these may feel like common sense, but we don't think about them maybe as much as we should. And I know, especially sleep, that's a huge, huge component of mental challenges. And really, if you're not, and that's what I often hear, especially from people that come to us that are needing help, is they need that sleep aspect, and it has a lot to do with it. But this whole conversation, I think, is so important of understanding as a youth how they might be affected, especially when they have a parent who experiences a mental health or lives with a mental health challenge. But then also bringing in that whole entire component of the family altogether. And then looking at it from a clinical and a connection community component. Absolutely. So I would love, can you share a little bit of information more specifically around where people can find you, your book that's just came out and coming out, and then any final thoughts that you might have, because we're coming to the end.
Oh my gosh, this went so fast. I did have one more thought. Can I say that before the others?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes.
That relates to a really big challenge, Kelly, and I'm sure you hear this. Let's say that this is fictional. This is not true. This is fictional. Let's pretend that my brother, I'm really aware that he's really struggling. He is drinking a lot, is smoking pot most every day, is not making it to work. His wife is thinking of leaving. I'm just really, really, really struggling. And I go to him and say, hey, man, you're depressed. You need to get some help. Come on, I'm a psychologist. I'll help you, blah, blah, blah. So often that person says, heck no, leave me alone, get away. What do you think? I'm crazy? Leave me alone, sort of stuff. They think, I don't have a problem. What are you doing? Leave me alone, get off my back, And so this struggle of when our loved ones don't want help, aren't open to help, sadly, the approach many family members take of kind of like, we're going to have an intervention. We're going to say, we're going to convince you, we're going to persuade you, just read this article or watch this YouTube video, or, let us all kind of try to convince you. It's like, oftentimes, sadly, that backfires. And so that is something that generally is not going to work and may actually increase resistance or lack of willingness to do so. Sometimes some illnesses, for example, schizophrenia and bipolar, they may not even have the awareness that they have the illness. There's a new term I've learned recently called anosognosia, which is technically lack of understanding, lack of insight into where you have an illness. All this point is where I'm going with all this is, if again, and my brother is sort of struggling, taking you should, I'm shaking my hand, you should do this, is going to backfire. Rather, what we know more and more is relationship. I'm there with you. I care about you. I'm here for you. Maybe you are telling me that you're really not sleeping well. It's okay, man. Would you want to talk to the doctor just about sleep? You don't have to talk about all this other stuff, but it's like, you're not sleeping. That's a problem. Or you're afraid of losing your housing. Wow, that's serious. Could at least help you with that. The more that we can lean into having, in that case, a good sister-brother relationship, the better it's going to be for our relationship, for him, and for his perhaps eventual willingness to seek help. No guarantees, but it's all about connection leading into relationship rather than trying to bribe, convince, persuade, intervene, maneuver, that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to add that as another example of the power of connection.
Love that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. The best way to read more about my mom and myself and our work, as well as we have some free resources on our website, is seedsofhopebooks.com. Seedsofhopebooks.com. There it is. And so you can see more about both of our books, which are available on Amazon or actually anywhere that you want to purchase them. The one for adults is called Loving Someone with a Mental Illness or History of Trauma, Skills, Hope, and Strength for Your Journey. And the one for teenagers is I'm Not Alone, a teen's guide to living with a parent who has a mental illness or history of trauma. And both of them are there. My mom and I do actually a lot of public speaking. And so if you have, a church or a community organization or things like that would like someone, via Zoom or in person to share information or give a workshop or things like that, you can contact us there as well through that, because we're really passionate about continuing to support families and raise awareness of some of these issues. So I just want to say this was so fun. You're a great interviewer, Kelly. And I just thank you so much for this opportunity. And I just praise and celebrate the important work that you're doing. And I loved even the BIPOC sort of example that you had up there and the people who've experienced so many different challenges. And so bravo to you. And it was really an honor to be part of this conversation today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and we're making these connections and thank you for your experience and your knowledge and everything. So thank you so much for being a guest for today.
You are welcome. Thank you.
All right, y'all, that was another amazing episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. I'm going to put this up one more time. And those of you that are listening, it is Seeds. So SEEDS of OF Hope, HOPE books, BOOKS.com that you can go check out the books. There's resources. And I just think that, again, this conversation is so important because oftentimes when we talk about mental health challenges, illness, disease, whatever you want to call it. We leave the key components out of whether it's the connection or it is involving the entire family. We're focusing on the behaviors versus all of the things that are going on, especially when we're talking about youth. So really, like, what's the backside of it? What are they experiencing? Because maybe their parents or anybody in their life are experiencing a mental health challenge and they're taking on a lot of pressure. So just some things to consider, some ways that we can really help people, again, feel seen, understood, and not so alone. And I hope this was helpful for you. No matter what you do, make sure that you come back next week. And every Monday, 5 a.m., 5 p.m. on Dream Vision 7 Radio, or you can watch on E360 TV at 5 p.m. Mountain Time every single Monday. I'll see you later.